Prime Minister Modi's big middle class budget. Everybody was looking out for income tax relief, and it did come, but did it go far enough? The budget clearly had one eye on the two poll bound states, Delhi and Bihar. In fact, there was a lot of emphasis on Bihar. In a moment from now, we'll be decoding with experts what's the big political and economic messaging of this budget. Nirmala Sitharaman made history with her eighth consecutive budget. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Welcome to our special focus on the union budget for 2025, widely being described as a budget to court the middle class in election season. In particular, Delhi, which is an urban state, with a large section of middle class voters. Income tax relief is where everybody's eye was. And the big announcement, of course, from the budget is that there will be no personal income tax payable on an income of up to 12 lakh rupees annually. The finance minister has also promised a new income tax bill to be brought before Parliament next week. There are other tax reforms as well, including hiking the TDS limit on rent and making withdrawals from the national savings schemes tax-free. But the emphasis has also remained on the poll-bound state of Bihar, with a slew of announcements for Bihar. In terms of fiscal deficit, it is estimated to be at 4.4%. How do we read these numbers? What's the big political messaging? Let me introduce our guests as we decode Modi 3.0's first full budget. I want to welcome to the program Sandeep Ghosh. Sandeep Ghosh is, of course, a political analyst. He's also somebody who I often describe as a fan of the Prime Minister, but does he approve of the Modi government's budget, its first full budget in 2025? We'll find out in a moment from now. I'm also joined by Govind Ethiraj, senior journalist, editor, man of many parts. Welcome, Govind. Good to see you after a long time. And I could see both Dr. Baru and Mitali Decode trying to join there, but neither have great networks. So hopefully they'll be up with us very soon. All right, let's get started with you, Govind. First thoughts on what we've seen so far, Govind?
Okay, so thanks, Baka, for having me on your show. So I think the 12 lakh middle class relief is definitely welcome, and we've already talked about that, and that's good. I think it has to be seen, however, and I'm saying this somewhat generally, in the context of what people have been going through in the last few years. Inflation has been very high, and particularly if you look at food inflation. So it's been eating away people's ability to spend, people's ability to consume. Also, then you have pretty high goods and service taxes on a lot of items, which has been the case for a while. So if you look at the combination of indirect taxes and inflation, for one, the cost of living for most Indians has been going up. So in a way, I would argue that this makes up in many ways and is not a complete giveaway. It is a giveaway from the government's point of view, but I think it only provides relief to people. That's one. The second point is, and I'm not going to lay blame on the budget or the finance minister for this, people are looking for income and how to increase their income. Tax relief is welcome, and it obviously gives you more purchasing power, but what people really want is income, and that's how you feel that you're progressing in life and so on. And I think on that front, it's generally accepted now that we are having a problem in India across the board. So and that's again sort of evident in many things. The second is, I think this is, to me, is a little more important. If you look at what's been happening in the last month, globally, forget India for a moment. Donald Trump has taken over as president. He's threatened to put a whole bunch of tariffs. In all probability, he's going ahead with Canada and Mexico and China today as we speak, with 25% and 10%. I don't know whether or what India will face, but it's likely that India will face. In any case, the threat of 100% tariff, if we even dream of a new alternate currency like a BRICS currency, is still hanging somewhere there. So this is the world that we are in. To me, the budget did not quite address it. I'm not saying that they had, you can pull rabbits out of the hat, but I think there is a new world today, and the budget, particularly when it comes to companies, small enterprises, and so on, did not quite address it, and give people the confidence that, okay, we can go and fight this global war. Now, there have been a lot of statements on ease of doing business, which somewhat dovetails into, let's say, addressing this larger problem of how do I become competitive, productive in a global context. But I think ease of doing business is something that usually, I would say, gets diluted on execution. and it's a plumbing challenge. It's not a policy challenge. I think the policy intentions are good. They've been articulated time and again, but they usually fail or they get diluted on plumbing. It's not so much maybe at the federal level, but definitely at the state level. So I think all in all, and we can, I mean, there are a couple of other points I can come back to later, but I think the tax part is good, but I think it only sort of eases things a little bit. But the larger thing that I was looking for to see, where are we as India today in a global context, in particularly given what's been happening with Trump and tariffs and China and all of that. That to me was not very clear from this budget so far.
Very quickly, I can see Dr. Baru joining us as well, but very quickly, some might argue that the budget is not necessarily the vehicle where India is going to have a calibrated gear shift on how to deal with the Trump-led world order, where, as you mentioned, tariffs have just been announced for Canada and Mexico and China by the Trump administration. What would you have been looking at from the budget to address this rapidly shifting world order, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so and I think about this quite often, So what I mean, let me twist that around. I'm saying, okay, what is the budget saying that could not have been said otherwise? I mean, if you look at 60-70%, and this is with all budgets, 60% or 70% of statements of intention and announcements, they could have very well been made outside the budget. So is the budget in itself the vehicle for grand announcements and pronouncements? Maybe not. But in this case, this is a real and present problem, and the budget was an opportunity to address it. Particularly if I'm a small and medium enterpriser, if I'm an exporter, I mean, I'm definitely looking for things which will help me or give me some confidence on how I'm going to fight that battle. I mean, think of that apparel exporter from Tirupur, for example. What is it that I'm going to, yes, there will be some ease of doing business. Yes, there is some customs rationalization, but these are small steps which keep happening all the time. Is there something dramatic? Now, you can ask me what that idea is, but I don't know. But I'm just saying, I didn't even sense it in the body language. And to me, that's important.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Baru there. A big announcement, of course, is no tax on income up to 12 lakh rupees. Govind Ethiraj says that he was looking for a bigger idea in the budget. But, where are budgets really the place for big ideas, or are they basically spaces for financial accounting and political messaging and laying out, in a sense, a kind of microeconomics policy framework? Are they really the place where you look for, okay, how is India going to respond as Trump announces tariffs on China on the one hand but quotes Xi Jinping on the other? I mean, isn't that expecting too much from poor Nirmala Sitharaman, who has made history presenting her eighth consecutive budget? Dr. Baru.
Look, Barkha, first of all, I agree with everything Govind has just said. Now, let me say 3 points. Point number 1, two very good friends of mine whom I have very high regard for, who have been very good, loyal supporters of Prime Minister Modi, Surjit Bhalla and R. Jagannathan, who are former editor of the Business Standard and Financial Express. Both Jaggi and Surjit, in the last week or fortnight, wrote a very interesting column each. Both of them wrote saying they want 2025 to be the 1991 moment. And I was quite taken aback for both of them. I think maybe the recent passing away of Dr. Manmohan Singh was weighing on their mind, but both of them wanted a 1991 budget. And then a lot of people then wrote about it. Many newspapers wrote editorials. Now, what exactly do we understand by 1991? If you go and read that budget speech of Manmohan Singh in 91, it didn't have anything about how much you'll spend in this program, how much in that program, how much in this sector, how much in that sector. No, it said the economy is in trouble and this is what we need to do to get out of trouble. And it ended by saying that no power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come, and the rise of India as an economic powerhouse is an idea whose time has come. Point number 1. Does this budget meet those standards? I'm afraid not. Second point, the economic survey written by the chief economic advisor in the Ministry of Finance, who sits not very far away from the finance minister's room. It's a brilliant survey. In fact, I compliment Anantha Nageshwaran for writing a very good survey. But unfortunately, though they are living in the same building, perhaps on the same floor, they are living in different worlds. The world in which Anantha Nageshwaran was living, writing that economic survey, is the world which is very close to what Govind was talking about, a world in which is all kinds of challenges, new challenges. and saying how does India respond to these challenges. Now, this budget speech told me what they will do in this sector, that sector, this class. Like, okay, middle class consumption. Consumption is a problem. We know ever since Suresh Narayan of Nestle publicly said that their sales are going down because the middle class is not consuming. Every other CEO selling white goods and consumer durables came out into the media saying, "Oh, middle class consumption is going down." So this is boosting that. But there are larger challenges. And I think what, at least in her sixth budget, Nirmala could have easily done is to say, okay, we've been in power for 10 years, 10 long years. This is not the first budget speech of a new government. This is the 11th budget speech of a 10-year-old government or 11-year-old government. But the world is challenging. At home, we are stuck at 6.5. My economic survey says unless I have 8% growth rate for the next 20 years, I cannot be a Viksit Bharat. The objective set by the Prime Minister cannot be attained without 8% growth over the next 10 years. This is what the economic survey says. So I was hoping she would tell us how will we get from 6.5 to 8. That is about macro. That is about expectation. Finally, very quickly, let me not monopolize. The third point I make is that you asked the question, what are budget speeches about? Yeah, budget speeches are partly about accounting, but that role of the budget speech has gone down because we are GST and there's a GST council, and there are certain things the finance minister can do, direct taxes, customs. And she need not have gone into those kind of details. I mean, I was thinking, am I in 1970 or 1980? For this commodity, this is the customs duty. For this commodity, this is the basic duty. For this subsector, this is what. So, see, this was the old budget speech. What I would have liked to see from the budget speech is an alteration in the state of expectations. By which I mean that we have now come to accept 6.5, the world's fastest growing large economy, and pat ourselves on the back. We are 6.5, But we know that that is not adequate. So, once again, did this speech address that concern of mine? It did not. Of course,
Are you being miserly with praise? I mean, should we first not start by saying, okay, great, we finally got some income tax relief? Like both you and Govind, okay, Govind at least said, okay, that was good, but you didn't even start there, Dr. Baru.
Yes, because I said, that's addressing an immediate problem. That is not addressing the long-term problem. There's a decline in middle class consumption, which everybody has written about over the last 1 year. And so here is a budgetary incentive to get the middle class to go out and buy, more commodities. And that's not a long-term thing. So I will be miserly. I mean, we in the media, we are supposed to be miserly in our praise. We are not here to, bang drums and praise the Prime Minister. You can do that if you want.
That last barb is highly unnecessary, Dr. Baru. I am simply saying, which is my job, to try and look at a story from all sides, right? There's some good, there's some bad, there's some indifferent.
That's not a barb. I'm having fun.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But Sandeep Ghosh, are you a little more rosy than Dr. Baru and Govind in the sense that they were looking for something that was bigger? I think Sanjay Baru saying that Nirmala Sitharaman kind of got into the weeds of detail that you no longer need the budget to do, that the budget should have spelled out a big vision, a bigger vision. There's a faster changing global order. Tariffs, as we already know, have been announced by the Trump administration for Canada, Mexico, and China. Things aren't going to be the same. The world isn't going to be a predictable space. And India's influence will be derived quite simply from how strong our economy is. That's what's going to give us leverage in this new changing world order, or not.
Absolutely correct, Barkha. No disagreement per se with what Dr. Baru or Govind has said, except some difference in perspective, I would say. First of all, I also don't make a big deal out of the income tax debates. That's more of talking point, more of headline people, and it affects by a fairly small number of people. I think the elephant in the room, according to me, is employment or income, as Govind said. That is, income tax relief can give you pump in some make Dr. Baru and my friend Suresh Narayanan a little happy because he'll sell a little more packs of Maggie next month. But it's beyond that, it's not really too much. It's at best, pumping in some oxygen in the system. The bigger issue is employment, and has this budget done enough, or could it have done enough to really, open up that sector? Now, I think the government's hands, to some extent, are also tied in just, expanding the overnight changing the employment game. And here, the biggest lever which was available to the government, to my mind, was the MSME sector. They have, because MSME sector, people are talking about investment coming up, large, big projects, etc. Unfortunately, none of those things have a huge employment multiplier, including what you're looking at, China plus one. If mobile manufacturing, etc., coming in, those don't have an investment multiplier. Investment multiplier really comes from the MSME sector. And there, as Govind was saying, the MSME sector's dependence on export is also very high. And without talking of tariffs, also the global economy being where it is, that sector has its problem. Now, whether we've been able to address it fully or in a very wholeheartedly, I'm not too sure. So that is one part. There is again some attempt to revive employment in the rural employment, non-agricultural employment, to try to stem migration from rural to big cities. There is some attempt to also talking about this growth-oriented tier 2, tier 3 cities, etc. But these are, I think, small measures, and you may or may not see immediate translation of that into labor. Because essentially two things come in, Barkha. This thing can only happen, we don't factor in, we depend everything on the center, but unless the states play ball, the tandem, and without using that populist term of double engine sarkar, not in a political sense, but unless the two engines operate together, you're not going to have the result. And the biggest issue when you're talking of ease of doing business, etc., we are shy of talking today. Retail corruptions come back, and the more complexity you will have in legislations like GST, etc., you are not going to have ease of business, and ease of business affects more than bigger companies, bigger projects. It affects the small enterprises much more. You're talking of credit line to the MSME sector, but we don't understand, despite that, how much of corruption or red tape is there for a genuine MSME guy to go and get loans from a PSU bank, even if it's a priority sector. So those are things. I'm not too sure. I'll only end by saying what Govind was talking about addressing Trump. I think it's a bit early in the day to even predict what Trump is going to do tomorrow. So probably one needs to wait and watch rather than do something preemptive with him. And as far as reform, big ticket reforms, what Dr. Baru was talking about, 1991, Jaggi and Surjit Palla Singh, I think there, to some extent, Modi government has once bitten, twice shy. They started off on a high note, trying to do big reforms when they came into power, but they were throttled on the way because waylaid, so to speak, first on the land reforms, then on the farm reforms. So I don't think they've tried to do, but I would have tried to do much more to kickstart the economy on the employment front just now. And that's where I wouldn't go all the way up to giving this budget 8 or 9, which some may be prone to doing as being, as Dr. Baru said, people like you to make the government happy.
Okay, I have to say, no one's ever accused me of that, in a while. But as they say, not just beauty, but bias is in the eyes of the beholder. But let me get started with what the finance minister said on tax. I think while Govind, you, Dr. Baru are focused on meta ideas, how is India going to respond to a changing global order? What's going to happen to jobs? A lot of people today are just looking to see, am I going to pay less income tax or more income tax? It may not be a large number in terms of absolute percentage of the country. A little over 3% pays income tax, but in a country the size of ours, that's big. So what did Nirmala Sitharaman say on income tax? The big announcement was, of course, no income tax payable up to an income of 12 lakh rupees annually. Listen in.
I'm now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees. So,
well, the Prime Minister certainly was giving his bang of approval there. Let's talk a little bit about this income tax announcement. Dr. Baru, what is your view on this big announcement? Clearly, there's a poll-bound sort of response here. There was Delhi is has large sections of middle class voters. There is also Bihar that is coming up, and the Prime Minister very vociferously there applauding the Finance Minister. What are your responses?
No, I see this is a band-aid solution. I mean, either you take the view that people like Subramanian Swamy have been taking for a long, long time, saying get rid of income tax. After all, how many people pay tax? What is the percentage of population paying income tax? And only the salaried are the honest taxpayers. Everybody else is frauding, right? So why do we have income tax? That is Subramanian Swamy's view for a long time. Or you take the view of the kind of more left of center economists who have been saying that this is not enough. That even someone earning 1 lakh a month is still in the top 10% of India's population, in the top 10%. And you have reduced the number of taxpayers to hardly 2 or 3, 4%. So there is a left view, there's a right view, right? The government always hang around in the middle. And this particular measure was aimed at addressing an immediate concern, which is what I've been saying. It's an immediate concern of a decline in middle class consumption reflected across the markets and written about over the last 6 months. So they're addressing that issue. Now, is this a tax reform? Let's wait and see the tax bill, etc. Will it make your life simpler with the tax authorities? I don't know. I mean, I was recently hired as a consultant for someone to earn 1 lakh rupees a month. Okay, 1 lakh. And they said, you have to pay GST on this. I'm not registered. I'm an individual. I'm not a small, medium enterprise. For earning 1 lakh, I would now register for a GST. I mean, what kind of a institutional system is this? So those are the larger issues. This thing, yes, it will put money in the pockets of the salaried class or the lower middle class, which is good. I mean, why should you deny them that additional income?
Okay. Okay. Let me bring in Govind, Sandeep, and Mithali, I think, who's finally stable and able to join us. Govind, quick responses, just specifically on tax. I mean, I think Dr. Baru is saying devil will lie in the detail. We've got to wait for the bill. Of course, nobody is going to oppose this relief of annual income up to 12 lakh rupees. It's welcome. But we don't know enough, Sanjay Baru seems to be saying, on what the new tax regime is going to look like.
So, Barkha, I think I'll two parts to this. One is specifically in response to what you're saying. I think you have to see what the expectations were. So, if the people, if I go by what people were telling me from the tax fraternity, the expectations are actually much higher. Maybe not on the 12 lakh, but definitely taking the highest slab up. For example, one of the clear expectations was that we should have the highest slab of tax rate of 30% beyond 50 lakh rupees. Right now, it's kicking in at much lower. So, while the 12 lakh and below, which is clearly a middle class recipe, is good, there is the real kind of the kicker in terms of consumption strength will only come at higher levels of income. And therefore, there you are. So above 20 lakhs is 30%. And the expectation, at least from several people I spoke to, was above 50 lakhs. That would have been maybe could have been significant in some ways. That's one part. I think the second is, we saw this introduction of something called TCS, right? So if you go abroad, you spend on credit cards, there's a presumptive tax, which does not exist anywhere in the world, on income on spending above 7 lakh rupees. Now it's been made 10 lakh rupees. My question is, why have that? I mean, this is such a 70s way of trying to track spending, trying to curtail expenditure, in this case in dollars. And I feel we should just have done away with it. And it's not that you can't track. I mean, the government is extremely well equipped now. I mean, the income tax department. There are enough transactions that we do through our banking system, through credit cards, there is sufficient ability to track literally every rupee and paisa that I'm spending today, and they can access it as and when they want. To add things like TCS and therefore make it cumbersome for everyone because someone went abroad and spent money on a wedding or whatever, or bought a Rolex watch, which you could not find out, is, I think, putting a lot of, and to me, that is the real problem. I mean, when you say ease of doing business, I mean, these are things that you should remove. I mean, and that, to me, I'm not seeing a change in approach and attitude, and that is really what worries me. So these are two slightly different answers, but both concern me.
Right. Dr. Baru, you want to add to that? Dr. Baru? Can we unmute Dr. Baru, please? Yeah.
On TCS, I'm glad Govind made that point. What is it that they've eliminated TCS on? On spending abroad for education. Now, this is actually a regressive thing. We are seeing billions of dollars going out of India for education overseas. And now the TCS has been removed only for the education. I mean, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, that's an important detail, and I think it impacts a lot of people who are watching this show. So thanks both of you for flagging it. Sandeep and then Mithali, I'll come to you for comments. You joined a bit late. We're looking specifically at the tax relief, but also whether the budget had a central big idea and what your takeaways are. But first, Sandeep, on the new income tax announcements.
See, income tax announcement, again, Barkha, I repeat, is neither here nor there. It should have, if they really wanted to do it for election reasons, they should have done it back in January. In the previous budget. That would have given them maybe a few more seats. Now, only to get a few more seats in Delhi, if they've done it, I think it's a bit of a waste. But it was required because they were unnecessarily creating a lot of bad sentiments because it's true, urban middle class especially has been under pressure. What Govind said, I take his point. It could have been better if they had taken it up about 24 lakhs. They would have reduced it, dropped it a bit, but that's a matter of detail. But even if they've done it for people below 12 lakhs, I think that's a relief. It'll get them some amount. Even I find opposition politicians are, claiming credit for it, saying that a victory of the middle class, etc. Well and good. But those are not really what's going to make the difference in your GDP numbers, which we are talking about. It's caused, as Dr. Baru said, 5% uptick in HLL and ITC shares. That's about it, but that's not going to really make a difference in the GDP.
Let's bring in Mithali on just first responses. What's your big takeaway?
Thanks a lot, Barkha, and apologies for my connectivity. So I think, some of the points which I wanted to echo and what everyone else has been saying. Firstly, I think on the income tax rebate, honestly, that is the big headline for today for all of us because it impacts us in different ways. I mean, today my team, for example, is celebrating because, each of them is obviously earning less than 12 lakhs and now they don't even have to file their income taxes. And even that cumbersome activity of actually filing taxes going away is something that they're really appreciating. So for the youth, honestly, where the demand was for more and more employment, this comes as a major relief. Even for me as an MSME.
Sorry, I think Govind is trying to say something. Sorry, Mithali, I'm interrupting you, but are you trying to say, Govind, you have to leave?
No, you have to file returns. You may not pay taxes, but you have to file returns.
Yeah, right. I understand. I mean, they are too exuberant. But they are celebrating this. But yeah, I mean, even for us as employers, this helps us because if I don't have to pay somebody say 30% extra or 20% extra because now they are exempt from taxes, I can possibly hire maybe one or two people more. So I think at the end of the day, for the MSME sector also, even for employers, this is a big relief, and particularly for youth employment, this is a big relief because for us, people then become a little bit cheaper to hire. So I think this is a very personal perspective that I wanted to sort of bring in first. But from a macro perspective, jobs were always the key reason why the government and the elections were not in their favor, in July. At the end of the day, when we looked at the results in July, there was discontentment amongst people because of high unemployment rates and also disguised unemployment, and the fact that there was underemployment across many sectors. Now, this relief comes as a relief for the salaried class. It also comes as a relief for MSMEs to some extent. But at the same time, this does not solve for the structural issues in the economy. While there have been some efforts that have been made, like the National Manufacturing Mission, and a lot of the investments in specific sectors like leather or footwear or toys, but at the same time, the big picture of the economy is around decentralization, empowering states and empowering cities, municipal corporations to actually invest at their level. And I think somewhere the decentralization agenda has got stalled because of the GST reforms as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. What's happening with GST? What about the fiscal deficit? All things we need to talk about. But first, a lot of attention on poll-bound states. Delhi, not so much directly. Bihar, very directly. A slew of announcements on Bihar. Let's just play out a little clip for you. Take a look.
Makhana board in Bihar. For this, there is a special opportunity for the people of Bihar. A Makhana board will be established in the state to improve production, processing, value addition, and marketing of Makhana. The people engaged in these activities will be organized into FPOs. The board will provide hand-holding and training support to Makhana farmers and will also work to ensure they receive the benefits of all relevant government schemes.
Okay, a Makhana board, these are very specific election-related announcements. Does anyone have any thoughts on a Makhana board? Okay, I'm being only partly facetious here. I think all governments do this, right? Sandeep Ghosh, let's start with you. Sandeep Ghosh.
I tweeted every budget, people used to look at what are the new trains for Bihar. Now you're starting getting new airports for Bihar. So that's a big change in Dixit Bharat or whatever. Makhana is good for, Weight Watchers like me. But I don't know how many employment. I'm very skeptical about these missions and institutes, etc. Institutes is the way government. It's a good talking point, but you're creating another white elephant, and that too doing it in Bihar. I'm not too sure what's going to yield. But when they're saying, the Mithilanchal is going to get focus, and that if that really happens in terms of, they're identifying the districts for agriculture and all, if those are implemented well, and the good part is all of them, they are doing it in partnership with states. None of that the center is saying they'll do it alone, and they're doing the convergence. And though it all depends on the execution, if that happens, I think it's good. But I don't think it's such a huge Bihar budget. Okay, they've made a few comments about Bihar, but much of it will be across the country. Bihar is where the difference in Bihar is happening is the infrastructure which is built now. It's now restarted, and there you could have a multiplier effect. People could see some results, but it's all the fine print. I would keep my eyes on the agricultural reforms which they're talking in terms of not agricultural, rural employment, that bit, and what they're the few things which we just talked about in the MSME sector, whether it's the leather, whether it's those to increase. And the skill building, there is some mention of skill building in a focused way. Even when they're talking of tourism, they have talked about skill building there. They're talking of skills in the both again in the manufacturing and the rural sector. If the skill building missions are taken forward, because this is something we've been talking for ages. And Barkha, I'll take half a second more. That's where we have a mismatch today. Your manufacturing employment is not going up. Services sector is growing, but there you don't have right amount of skills. And that skill building is not happening, and that's where this mismatch in employment is happening. So it has to happen both ways. Your manufacturing employment has to go up, but at the same time, the services sector, for that, you have to create skills. Otherwise, you will not be able to compete with even the Asian countries.
Okay, let's now focus on the big picture. The big idea, Govind and Dr. Baru feels was missing. But what is the big picture? The fiscal deficit, the estimation of the fiscal deficit, juxtaposing that with the GDP. As I was saying, even if you look at this through geopolitics, Govind Ethiraj, India's leverage is going to come from India's economy, from India's growth. Especially since, and Sanjay Baru was making this point on a different show earlier, if Trump cuts a deal with China, I mean, we don't know because, he's just announced tariffs on China, but if Trump does cut a deal with China, the idea of India being the countervailing force to China, may not have the same amount of influence as we had assumed it would. To that extent, our influence is going to come on the world stage from how strong our economy is. When you look at the GDP, when you look at the fiscal deficit, what do you say?
So on the deficit, I'll defer to Dr. Baru. He's definitely he's the economist here. Let me bring in another point. I think and we usually talk about this right away. And I saw a few business leaders respond to the budget, and I was trying to understand what they were exactly zeroing in on. The answer is actually nothing. So the reason is there is really no incentive, and I'm not saying financial incentive, for private investment to go up. One of the big challenges we've been facing in the last few years is that private sector is not keeping pace with government expenditure, and private sector is actually holding on to money. While it's making more money because it's managing its costs well, it's keeping salaries low and all of that, but it's not really pumping it back. And if you look at capacity utilizations, they're not they're definitely in the 70-80% range, depending on which industry you look at. So there is a problem there, and there is no easy solution to this. But this is something, again, how do you address this? And is there something? Is there a big idea? Is there some special economic zone? No, I'm not saying there should be, but what is it that the government could have done to say that, okay, I can really give you something big so that you as private sector can go and invest? By shouting in them or scolding them is not going to work. I don't think we can give any more tax relief because our corporate tax level is low, and it's tough to go below 25%, which is where we are right now. So, but the problem is still that we don't have enough private sector investment, and if we don't have enough private sector investment, you will not create enough jobs. So it's a vicious circle of sorts, to which I'm not seeing a very clear answer, and I was looking for something which I obviously didn't see. A couple of small things. I think futuristic. The budget talked about this small nuclear reactors. I mean, I remember chasing this story 20 years ago, where there were reports of the act being amended, private sector being allowed, and all of that. Which obviously, and I remember it because I remember meeting someone from Tata Power saying that, okay, we've set up a small team and they're going to chase this. Nothing happened, and it's really more than 20 years now, and at least they've talked about this. So these are some of the brighter things. I think on the energy side, including on batteries, including on electric vehicles and nuclear, I think there are some good announcement of intentions, and which I would expect from any budget, though. But if and as they fructify and materialize, I think that's good for the economy.
Okay, Mitali, you said that there's a certain celebration in younger people whose incomes are below 12 lakh rupees annually. And that point is taken. But in terms of the growth figures, right, you have people like, for example, economists like Raghuram Rajan, who on my program recently said, 6% isn't going to cut it. He said we should be growing much faster. Your thoughts?
So I think, Barkha, when you look at the economic survey that came out yesterday, there are two numbers that really stand out in the economic survey. The first number that stands out is the target that the economic survey has set for us to be a Viksit Bharat by 2047, which is that we need to achieve an upwards of 8% growth rate for at least 10 years. And we're not seeing that projected even for the next 3 years. So, that is one target that has to be achieved. The second is around jobs. One has to create at least 8 million jobs annually to absorb the youth population of the country. And over the last decade, when we look at the data, it's quite evident that we haven't generated 8 million jobs in any of the years. So, what are we actually doing to achieve these two numbers and achieve like a medium term kind of growth rate? What I liked in the budget from that perspective were three things. Number one, I liked the reimagination of the rural economy. And I think we haven't spoken about that yet. But I mean, the first thing that she talked about was about holistic rural development and the idea that migration from rural to urban areas should be a choice as opposed to a compulsion. And I think, at least as an idea, it was a good idea to see it. I'm not sure again about the implementation, but at least from a speaking point of view, and for us to listen to that, it's good to hear that. The second point which I really liked was around the national manufacturing mission, because again, we can't expect manufacturing to generate up to even 2 or 3 million jobs per year at the current investment rates, and also at the level of automation that we're seeing. Through my own personal visits to so many steel plants and other factories, I'm seeing massive amount of automation and labor replacement. So we need to create people who can work with machines, be highly productive, and then you can have more and more investment in a more productive landscape. And the third point which I liked was around exports and the export led development story, where she's trying to make processes and compliances, customs duties, regulations all much easier, especially for MSMEs, though this does not require much of allocation of resources. And even the idea of setting up facilitation committees for specific sectors which are highly export competitive is a very
Sure.
practical suggestion. So these were
Okay.
some of the things which went well, in my view.
Okay, let me bring in Sandeep Ghosh and then give Dr. Baru the last comments. And I thought of you particularly when I quoted Raghuram Rajan, because when I had shared that interview, you said, "Can't believe, Barkha, you're still interviewing Dr. Raghuram Rajan. You're obviously not a fan." Keeping aside your opinion about him as an individual, there is a lot of debate around the growth figures, right? There is a lot of debate around what is going to be a stimuli for more spending. That government spending can't substitute private spending, because then the deficit quite clearly goes up. You opened by saying that jobs is the white elephant, and you don't feel the budget really took a look at that beyond this tinkering of the income tax. What do you think the government could have done that it hasn't done, and what do you think it got right in this budget?
No, I said that the government, it's not that they didn't do enough. I said how much more they could do. And I think the biggest challenge in all of these is how the states collaborate with the government. That is the biggest thing. And what Mitali was saying, there are ways they've tried to nudge. They've made some of the schemes which are dependent states can get loan if they're delivering the reforms, etc. Those have to come. Without that, the government is not going to be able to translate the jobs. And because that part is over, government is doing its infra spending, whatever jobs are created, but that is not really creating the manufacturing jobs which is required. Okay, you try to replace the stem the migration from rural to cities, etc. But that is also will take its time. It's not going to happen overnight. Some of that. So to do this, how they really push the states. One good part is wherever there is so-called this double-engine sarkar operating, I find there is a greater sense of urgency to push industrialization. In some places, we have seen that has happened. Madhya Pradesh, it's not realized today. During the period, Madhya Pradesh's whole economy itself has, the market itself has grown because Madhya Pradesh has developed. So people are going and setting up industry there because there is a lot of local consumption which is happening. Maharashtra is a place now has to get back on stream because Maharashtra, for all the political turmoil and upheavals last few years, I feel was a bit of a washout. And there are also governance issues. So those have to really come back on stream, and only then are you going to see the traction. So now, as Govind used this term, a lot of plumbing has to be done, and that plumbing has to be driven by the center. Now that the government is feeling much more confident, and if they get these elections on their way, they will have to drive because there's no way politically also the government, it's going to be increasingly difficult They cannot go by. Shikhar Gupta says that our middle class is addicted to Narendra Modi's lack of growth. So something that addiction is not going to last for very long. They have to provide something more.
Right. In fact, we didn't talk, Dr. Baru, about the fact that other little sops for the consuming middle class that has disposable income was the fact that smartphones, electronic devices, cars are now going to cost less. But yes, let's come back to the growth story and the fiscal deficit numbers. I'll give you the closing word on that.
Barkha, look, first of all, fiscal deficit, she said she'll reduce it, and I guess they are on track slowly. I mean, the speed at which is being brought down is less than what was warranted by the FRBM, but FRBM was abandoned long back. So I don't think that's such a big issue. Look, what are the big issues? The big issues are elections are over, right? You won Maharashtra also. I mean, Bihar is not going to vote on the basis of this. Nor, I think, in Delhi would this make too much of a difference. Elections are behind you. 10 years are behind you. On the one hand, you have a difficult international environment. On the other hand, your growth rate is below par, whatever the disputed numbers. So this was the moment, which is why Jaggi, whom I respect a lot, Surjit, whom I respect a lot, so many of them who are great admirers of Modi, were all saying in 1991, what was this whole chant about? It was that we need looking forward. And the economic survey whetted our appetite by talking about the need for giving space for enterprise, having less headache and mental liberation. What a lovely language that Ananta used. And what did we get? Little tinkering here, little tinkering there, promise of a mission, promise of a committee. You saw what is that? Yes, Prime Minister series, BBC. And when this minister calls his secretary and says, look, I'm under a lot of pressure to do something about this. He says, Minister, when you're under a lot of pressure to do something, the best option is to appoint a committee. So the economic survey says regulations are the big burden. Ease of doing business, you need to get regulations out of the way. Now, don't tell me you've not thought over 10 years what those regulations are. You now appoint a committee that will give the report 1 year from now to tell you what regulatory authoritarianism is going on in this country. You spend 10 minutes with a businessman and they will tell you what are the kind of regulatory problems these are. I mean, Mitali spoke about the kind of small enterprises. You don't need a committee to sit for 1 year to decide. You could have done it overnight. Manufacturing mission. 2006, the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council was set up under V. Krishnamurthy. And then they came out with a report called the Manufacturing Strategy, which was the basis for the 12th five-year plan. What happened? The objective set in 2006 was to increase the share of manufacturing from 17% at that time to 25% by 2020. That was the objective. And where are we today? Below 17%. So missions, committees, come on, yeah. You do something that would have woken up business. Last word I will tell you. In 2019, Nirmala's first budget, and I praised her for that. I mean, since you said I was sounding very critical of her today, I mean, I wrote a column in praise of Nirmala Sitharaman in 2019 because she had that lovely sentence in that speech where she said, I'm increasing public investment because an increase in public investment will stimulate private enterprise, and I'm hoping that the private sector will take the lead and move on from here.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. 2019. Private investment is still not picked up. So the question that Govind raised, why are businessmen not excited? Because what is it? How has the state of expectations changed? We are still taking credit for 6.5. They are all hoping you'll tell us how to get to 7.5. So we will go on. We'll go on like this. It's not a major crisis. It's not a major catastrophe. But it's not going to make you rise to the challenge being posed by China. That's not going to happen. With this kind of economics and politics, forget about multipolar Asia, multipolar world. You'll have a bipolar world. The Americans and the Chinese will run this world.
Well, that is a grim last word, that this tinkering can't be India's answer to China. The bipolar world will then be defined by China and the United States. For India to be a giant on the world stage, this tinkering will not do. The answer to what the economic survey raised can't be one more committee. We leave it there. The debate will carry on. Govind Ethiraj, Sanjay Baru, Mitali Nikore, Sandeep Ghosh. Always a pleasure. Thank you and have a great weekend.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.